They look pretty real, but try and punch in a number, they just don't work. James says it's possible to be like that as a Christian. He says it's possible to deceive ourselves. James 1:22, we've read it. Don't merely listen to the word and so deceive yourself. It's possible to come to youth link every Saturday, be listening. You know, everyone's around it. They really attend, but just listen. It's possible to deceive even ourselves. That's a daft thing, isn't it? Possible to be listening to sermons, but to be a useless hearer of God's word. Don't merely listen to the word and so deceive yourselves. Do what it says, James says. Chapter 2, verse 14. It's possible to claim a living faith and yet be as dead as a doornail. What good is it, my brothers, if a man claims to have faith but has no deeds? Can such faith save him? That kind of faith is dead. Verse 26. As the body without the spirit is dead, so faith without deeds is dead, because it doesn't work in the real world. How do you know if a mobile phone's dead or not? Well, because it doesn't work. It's possible to sound very caring and yet be quite careless of the needs of others. James goes on to talk about that. Suppose a brother or sister is without clothes, chapter 2, verse 15, and daily food. If one of you says to him, "Go, I wish you well. Keep warm and well fed," but doesn't do anything about his physical needs, what good is it? It's supposed to sound very caring. "Oh, I'm sorry to hear that you're having money troubles at the moment. I'll pray for you." And forget that, well, the Lord may actually be willing to answer our prayers quicker than we thought, just by moving our hand into our pocket and see? It's possible to sound very caring, yet be quite careless of the needs of others. It's possible, this is shocking, it's possible, says James, to be right in belief and yet as rebellious as a demon. It's possible to be right in belief and yet as rebellious as a demon. Listen, verse 18, halfway through the verse. "Show me your faith without deeds, and I'll show you my faith by what I do. You believe that there's one God. Good. Great," he says. "I'm delighted. Even the demons believe that." Do you see what I'm saying? A faith that's real Christianity has got to be more than image, more than talk. It's got to work. Well, I could go on, because James picks up loads of things. I'd like to encourage you, those of you who haven't got Bibles, why don't you, when you get home, do something? Pick it up, open it to James, and just read it through. You'll find he talks about all of this kind of stuff, and he addresses precisely the kinds of issues that we face. James writes his letter with this great theme at the centre of it: real, practical Christian living. And it's summarised in chapter 1, verses 26 and 27. We're going to use those verses as a key to understanding pretty much the rest of the book. So I'm not going to read all of this. You can go away and have a look at that for yourself. But I want you to get an idea of what this book's about, because it's one of the most important books in the New Testament for our generation. It cuts through the image stuff and it gets to reality. Kind of reality that can make a difference for our lives. If anyone considers himself religious and yet doesn't keep a tight rein on his tongue, he deceives himself and his religion is worthless. So that's the first thing. Tongue. And here's two more. Religion that our God and Father accepts as pure and faultless is this: to look after orphans and widows in their distress. Second thing, care for those in need. and to keep oneself from being polluted by the world. Third thing, staying clear of the muck. That's Christian living in the real world. In a nutshell, if you like, or at least in James's little nutshell. Use of the tongue, caring for others, particularly those in need, keeping ourselves out of the muck of the world. And those are the things that we're going to think about just for the last few minutes of our meeting tonight. Living as a Christian in the real world means controlling the tongue. Let me read a bit of chapter 3 for you. Not many of you should presume to be teachers, my brothers, because you know that we who teach will be judged more strictly. We all stumble in many ways. If anyone is never at fault in what he says, he's a perfect man, able to keep his whole body in check. When we put bits into the mouths of horses to obey them, we can turn the whole animal. I'll take ships as an example. They're so large and driven by strong winds. They're steered by a very small rudder, wherever the pilot wants to go. Likewise, the tongue is a small part of the body, but it makes great boasts. Consider what a great forest is set on fire by a small spark. The tongue is also a fire, a world of evil among the parts of the body. It corrupts the whole person, sets the whole course of his life on fire, and is itself set on fire by hell. It's a restless evil, full of deadly poison, says James. Well, I haven't got time to go into all those illustrations with you, but they're clear enough, aren't they? Tongue is only small, but it can have a huge impact on our own lives. The tongue can do damage, not only to us, it can set fire, a fire that tears through our relationships, and tears through the hearts and minds of others as well, and hurts dreadfully. And the tongue not only can burn like that, but it's fearfully untamable. It's more difficult to tame than a tiger. And you and I know that. Yeah, don't you find that? You know, sometimes your tongue's a way off before your brain's even got in gear. Someone does something, says something to you that annoys you, and maybe justifiably so, but all of a sudden there's a torrent come out of your mouth and you can't think, whoa, whoa! But it happens. The tongue. Living as a Christian in the real world means controlling the tongue. Now the reality of the real world is this, isn't it? We're living in a world where the tongue isn't controlled. So your friends use expressions, take the name of the Lord in vain, say all sorts of things that are passing through your mind. You can't stop that happening. You can't go around with your ears blocked up all the time. You can't stop it happening. But the problem is those things get into our mouths, and so easily we find them coming out of our mouths. And James's illustrations all have to do with control. Self-control. Control of the tongue. It's a tough thing in the real world. It was one of the things that I struggled with most as a young Christian. The language that was being used around me. And avoiding it playing back in my head, in my own thinking, and avoiding it playing back out of my mouth. Real Christianity will start to make a difference. In my case, it did. It took time. Everything happened at once. But it makes a difference, practically there. We'll see a little bit how before we finish. But it's not just that area, is it? It's not just bad language. And it's not just the kinds of jokes we tell. Oh, it's that as well. One of the most fearful curses amongst our kind of Christians, and I have to tell you it's not our mixed right across the range of Bible-believing Christians is not as bad amongst others as it is amongst folk from broadly our kinds of churches. It's gossip. It's the same thing. I know some of you from camps. I was on camps. Things start going around the camp. And in our churches, things start going around. And I know, you may tell me, well, yeah, you should hear what some of the grown-ups say in our church as well. I hear some of that. Well, I know, but that's no excuse for us. We're a new generation. Can I plead with you to control your tongues about each other? Do you know what such and such said? Well, no, they probably don't, but do they need to know what such and such said? Do you know what such and such did? Well, probably no, they don't, but do they need to know what such and such did? Will it help them to know? And then, of course, you know how it is with these things to do with the tongue. They grow, don't they? That's the image of the forest fire. You set a little fire going in a forest, and it grows. And the things that we talk about of each other, to each other, they grow out of proportion. Do you know what such and such did? Well, that may be true, but it goes on to the next person and it's been embellished a little bit. Because we all love a story, don't we? And, you know, people like me and Alan who do evangelism, we love stories. They're the best. They're great for us, aren't they, Alan? Stories. And, you know, and there's a temptation for the story to grow. Of course, there's always that temptation. You know, the better the story, the more you keep people with you and all of that. That's why it's safest to use stories that everyone knows aren't true for a start off, because, you know, at least then you can't get caught out for. But, you know, the stories, we all love a story. And we love embellishing our stories. And our stories about each other. Real Christianity that isn't just about image, but lives in the real world and that really makes a difference. Have to do with controlling the tongue. Anyone who considers himself religious and yet doesn't keep a tight rein on his tongue deceives himself. You say, of course I'm religious. I go to the right conferences. I'll be at this one here in a week 2's time. But if you don't control your tongue at that conference, there'll be nothing godly, Christian, or religious about your attendance. Oh, but I go on camps in the summer, you know, the best kinds of camps. Well, yeah, but if you see? I do evangelism. I use my tongue well. Yeah, but if you use your tongue to slander others, as well as to praise God, you show that deep down in your life, there's something polluted. The stream that issues out of your mouth sometimes runs clear and sometimes runs muddy. And it means that something down there is wrong. First thing then, tongue. Living in the real world, control our tongue. Living in the real world means caring for the deprived. Religion that God our Father accepts as pure and faultless is this, to look after orphans and widows in their distress. The first bit about the tongue, that gets followed up in chapter 3 of James. This bit gets followed up in chapter 2. James paints a picture. My brothers and sisters, as believers in our glorious Lord Jesus Christ, don't show favouritism. Suppose a man comes into your meeting wearing a gold ring and fine clothes, and a poor man in shabby clothes also comes in. If you show special attention to the man wearing fine clothes, and say, here's a good seat for you, but say to the poor man, here, you sit here. Or sit on the floor by my feet. Haven't you discriminated among yourselves and become judges with evil thoughts?